treating this moment like it's just, Americans been in bad things before and we'll have another chance at the election. And it's like, no, that's not, this is the thing. You all knew this was the last one. So I don't know. I don't have much faith in that. That's just where I'm at.
But I see what you mean though. But, go ahead, Jen, go ahead.
Oh, well, but for folks that study social movements, for folks that study authoritarian regimes, and authoritarian regime stability and democratic erosion and, all of those things, which, I don't study all of that exactly, but I read a lot of that stuff because I'm interested in it and it's related to communication democracy. For those folks, what they find is that democratic regimes are actually quite stable. And more stable than authoritarian regimes are. And so an example like Russia or whatever, they didn't have democratic practices to draw upon. And so usually if a nation has a history of democratic practices, then it is more likely to keep those democratic practices, even if they go through, sort of hiccups and sort of regime changes. And so it isn't necessarily all or nothing. There's some really great folks that study democratic erosion. And if you haven't had them on your show, I'm sure you and your audience would just love to talk to them. I can put you in touch with some folks that I know.
Please.
Yeah. Like really great.
That's a
really
great
good stuff.
Conversation.
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
To your point from before, Jen, I think that if we go back even and look at American history, like I'm not talking about individuals capitulating, but just in a larger scale sense, we talked about McKinley and his tariffs, and then McKinley gets killed and Teddy Roosevelt comes in and whoop, all this great shit happens.
And that's how we got our parks.
Yeah.
That's how we got our parks.
And then the Great Depression happens and then FDR comes in and boom, we have the New Deal, right? So they took advantage of these moments where maybe the powers that be didn't want it that way. And, as a great philosopher once wrote in a book that I read, when you have revolutions, which is what they're trying to do right now, what they want is probably not going to wind up what they're getting. All that they will succeed in doing is destroying the existing form. And it's probably going to be somebody else that's going to swoop in and save the day. And I know that this is correct because it's in the Unabomber manifesto and they keep quoting it.
Unabomber is good, actually, I hear. It's really interesting. If you look at all of the protest movements, like the Arab Spring and things like that in the 2010s, this, so-called like Facebook revolutions and things like that, a lot of those countries did not end up with stable democratic regimes. And that's because they didn't have a plan, right? And so they got all these people to go into these public squares and to protest, and they were able to topple these, autocratic regimes, but they didn't have already an infrastructure and a plan like put in place. And so, of course, they created a power vacuum. And of course, power vacuums don't last. Somebody's going to swoop in who is even more autocratic. And that's what happened in most of those places. And so, the lesson is not, not to topple the autocratic regime, but it's to have a plan.